Hello and welcome to another podcast of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rocky, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, today we're going to conclude our virtue series with temperance. So, as the formula has worked very well, we're going to let you start by telling us what temperance is in the eyes of the church, and then we're going to go from there grounded in knowledge.
Well, again, the four cardinal virtues or human virtues, which really go back to Aristotle and then were taken up in the Catholic tradition, are certainly taught to us by the scholastic St. Thomas Aquinas and that whole school of theology. But the four cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, are kind of cover all of the human virtues. In baptism, we get kind of an extra boost. We get a little share in Christ's own prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. They're known as infused virtues. There's an infused grace there that is poured into those areas of our hearts. And again, the virtues are like muscles. They're like spiritual muscles that they give us strength to do certain things. So just like physical muscles give us the capacity to do certain things, a strong man can lift something. He has the ability to do something that a weak man may not be able to do. You probably can lift some things that I can't lift, Joe. And those virtues enable us to do things that if we don't have them, if we don't build them, we can't do. And they're also like muscles in the sense that the more we use them, the stronger they get. And the less we use them, the more they kind of deteriorate. So we want to keep using our virtues. Now, we don't have to think about, just like we don't have to think about using our muscles most of the time. It's kind of the amazing thing, when somebody is bedridden, they don't realize, even just after a couple of days of not walking at all, of not putting our clothes on, of not opening doors and lifting just real simple things, it's amazing how quickly our muscles deteriorate. We're using them all the time, actually, our physical muscles. And in fact, we're using our spiritual muscles. We're using our virtues all the time, too. It's not so much a matter of intentionally doing these things. But sometimes, just like weightlifting, we can focus on one or another of them a little bit just to pay attention. Is there a deficiency here? Is there something I'm not doing here? So temperance, I suppose we use that word, at least it comes to me that the secular use, the world's use of that word might be associated specifically with alcohol. We think of the temperance movement that was toward the beginning of the 20th century. That's probably the first time I came across that word in in high school history studies or something. The temperance movement is about alcohol, is about tempering our use of alcohol, actually eliminating it in the temperance movement. But temperance, and we get that sense of it, it's tempering our appetites. We have a certain attraction to things, a hunger for things. So somebody who really likes alcohol, for example, may have a real hunger for that, and kind of holding it back so that our appetite, so that our hunger doesn't overtake us, doesn't lead us to do things that are ultimately bad, getting drunk, or a hunger for, I don't know, some other drug or something, getting high, but a hunger for food that overtakes us, so that we eat so much in a gluttonous way that we're really overeating, overindulging. Temperance holds us back. It tempers our appetite. That would be the case also with with maybe sexual lusts, or lust for power, or lust for goods, for material goods, a lust for money. Temperance holds us back in all of those areas. And so I just listed a number of kind of sub-virtues of temperance. Temperance applied to our sexual appetite is what we call continence or chastity, ultimately. Temperance applied to our appetite for food is to prevent the vice of gluttony, is eating in a temperate way, or sobriety, I guess, would be part of that. Temperance in terms of food and drink would also be applied to, we would talk about fasting and abstinence is an application of temperance to the area of food and drink. So temperance is just learning how to hold back some of those appetites. Because remember, the mother of the virtues is prudence. That's being able to recognize the good. And then sometimes we have that problem, even knowing the good. And people say this, I know I shouldn't have this box of chocolate. I know I shouldn't drink this fourth beer. I know I shouldn't. Well, why don't you then? Well, because the virtue of temperance isn't sufficiently developed to be able to hold myself back, to say no to myself. That's ultimately what temperance is doing, is saying no, learning to say no to myself. And so, anyway, I think that's maybe gets us going, that gives us a kind of sense of the space in which temperance applies in our daily lives.
Certainly. So essentially, at the end of the day, what temperance really is, it's self-control and self-discipline for those who want to put it into normal everyday terms. So the million-dollar question is how do you create temperance around you? Some people will join a football team and they'll be forced to have it. You have to show up. You have to put yourself out there and grow. There's a discipline that's essentially forced upon you. Things like the military would do the same thing, where you're in a regiment and you have to do this, this, and that. But the vast majority of us live in a space where we can essentially do whatever we want. And as long as we don't break any laws explicitly and have to be forced in jail, we can continue down this road of doing whatever we want. So as adults, we don't really have a whole lot of structure in the sense that there's someone overseeing you, forcing you to live your life in your way. You may have a boss that's intense about your work and disciplining you there, but as far as the rest of your life and the decisions therein, there's not normally someone over your shoulder. So what I wanted to take this here was, how do we create that in our own everyday lives? Because you're exactly right. You do hear everywhere around you, oh, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. And I'd like to address that, because virtue is something we need to grow. Might as well figure out how to do it.
Well, just to make a quick comment, Joe, about that you have a nice insight there, that about law, that law actually helps us to grow in virtue. You said if your boss makes you, or is standing over your shoulder, then that helps us to do what's right, to do the good. So law is meant to provide some constraints to help us. So likewise, you might be real hungry, but you're unlikely to steal something from a convenience store because, it's against the law. So there are different ways that law can help us to form virtue. And that's actually very much the purpose of law, is to give a structure around which it helps us to form virtue, helps us to form our prudence, what's right, what's wrong, helps us to form a sense of justice, what does each person do, gives us a sense of the good that might be hard to achieve, requiring fortitude, or the desire that we have to temper and hold back with the virtue of temperance. So anyway, following the law and maybe having some household rules, having some company policies, we shouldn't be too bashful about that. We don't want to create a police state either, but there's a value, there's a role that law plays. Also, in terms of temperance, how do we apply these things? Well, recognizing what's good, having some accountability and transparency, again, helps us to have a little bit of self-awareness, so that I don't just say to myself, I know I shouldn't, but rather I say, I know I shouldn't, and because, my wife is watching me, I'm not going to. So a little bit of accountability and transparency helps us to strengthen our temperance a little bit, to give ourselves some, to make some choices that develop our self-control, and that can be very helpful. A couple of areas, one thing I should say is, the virtue of temperance, to grow in one thing helps us to grow in another thing. That is to say, learning to say no to myself in regard to food and drink will help me to say no to myself in terms of sexual indulgence, or help me to say no to myself in terms of um, following curiosities. That's an interesting point about temperance. When I develop a habit of, I can look at anything I want to on the internet, and I foster that kind of curiosity. St. Thomas calls it the vice of curiosity, where I just say, well, I want to look at this now. I want to look at that now. I want to look at that now. What am I doing? I'm just indulging my desires. And so just following everything, and wasting a lot of time in the process, and maybe wandering into immoral areas of the internet and looking at immoral things, or indulging in gossip and conspiracy theories and judgments and all these other kinds of things. So holding back my curiosity, being responsible about that. Another area of temperance is humility. So pride is a kind of excess that we can be driven to, indulging thoughts about ourselves, indulging self-aggrandizement, thinking I'm something more amazing than I really am. And under temperance, we have humility, which is actually seeing myself as I am, seeing myself as God sees me, holding back the kind of megalomania, the self-aggrandizement, the thought that I'm amazing and I can do whatever I want to. So these are all different areas of the virtue of temperance that we can continue to develop.
And that makes a lot of sense. You see people who just get lost in their phones and lose the rest of the world. You could find some cool things on Pinterest, but at a certain point, you only need to see so many puppies. Just keep it moving. And that would make a lot of sense. So I liked what you said there about it's more than just having someone around you. You have to be accountable to yourself. You need to be actually self-motivated to do this, to learn to be better. And I've heard it said many times that as an individual, you either have a motor or you don't. But the way that you're explaining this here is that's not the case. Is you can essentially make your own motor and rev it up or rev it down as much as you want. Going back to your original analogy about muscles, if you're sitting in bed and not using them, they detract, they decline. Whereas if you continue to exercise, you become stronger and faster. So self-discipline inherently has to work the same way, being a self-starter, being self-accountable. For someone out there who's struggling with this, as there are many of us that are, how do you continue to round the corner whenever you might know what's the right thing, but you just can't? Whether it be, I have been spending all of my non-working time on Pinterest, and even some of my working time on Pinterest or PlayStation or whatever your social platform of choice is. So what would the example be to say, hey, do this and you will start to see benefits?
Well, you use the word motors, and related to the word motor is emotion. And so it's not actually the case that we can just sort of rev ourselves up or rev ourselves down. Absolutely. So if you don't have any emotion, if there's no passion, virtue all depends. Virtue is really a shaping of passion, a shaping of emotion, of those motors. They call them the appetites, the concupiscible and the irascible appetites. Our appetites of desire and our appetites of resistance. So we have to have some of those appetites, and motivation is a little bit of a different thing. Our motivation, at least in the context of our podcast, we're talking about the motivation to holiness. I want to have, or a motivation of fulfillment. I want to have a meaningful life. I want to have an eternal happiness. I want to grow in love, ultimately. I want to grow in my relationship with God. I want to, and we can be motivated by other kind of lesser motivations, like I want to be successful, I want to have enough money, I want to have friends, I want to have. So all of these are some motivations, and the fact that I'm, attracted, that I want to eat, and that I want to work, and that I want to get up in the morning, are good things. So temperance is about holding back. It's about when I already have some desire, I already have some attraction, I already have some push towards something. It's about holding back and shaping that so that it doesn't overcome me and lead me into overindulgence. So actually generating emotion, generating motivation, that's a little bit of a different area. In some cases, it's formed by prudence. I see that something is good. I want to choose the good. Now I'm attracted to the good, and then maybe it's difficult, so I have to apply fortitude, or maybe I'm too attracted to it. I have to apply temperance and kind of hold myself back. But so motivation is a little bit of an additional piece, and figuring out everybody has kind of a unique motivational structure. People are motivated by different drives. There's a book called Unrepeatable, I think, by Josh Miller and Luke Burgess, and they look at motivational structures and the impact on personal vocation, and it's very interesting. There's an assessment called MCORE, which looks at our core motivations, and anyway, there are some interesting things in that direction. But applying temperance is really shaping our passions, and as we become more virtuous, our emotions will kind of go along with our virtues. So I start to be attracted to the right things in the right amounts. I start to be attracted to the good and have the confidence that I can overcome the obstacles. I start to be attracted to making good decisions and being able to see the good. So our emotions tend to get shaped by our use of virtue. By the more we do good, the more we're kind of motivated by the good, and the more that we have the energy to keep doing good.
Perfect. Well, that makes sense. So it comes down to passion, comes down to what are you already interested in doing and what is there. And hopefully you have the prudence from our last episode to have it geared towards something that is good and well, rather than just something that's not, for lack of a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So we touched upon this a little bit in this cast and a little bit in the last cast. One of the things that in our society that hold that back is, as we mentioned a couple times here, getting drunk and getting high. At the end of the day, if you're sitting on your couch just watching TV and getting high and eating munchies, you're not really progressing in anything. You're not really getting that passion going or that motor going in any capacity. So obviously we can't get into this whole big thing of if you need medical attention, obviously do that. But we do know that there's a lot of people out there that struggle in that department. And maybe we've already touched upon the answer here of how to deal with it. But when thinking of those types of people around us or in our lives, what is us as a second party or third party, what could we potentially do to help someone else down that journey of temperance?
Yeah, it's a great question. These things, applying them to real life immediately starts to become very sticky. And so just to observe that, I mean, I'm not going to be able to present all of the teachings of psychology over the last 150 years, which are entirely oriented to your question, and there are different schools of thought and different approaches to these things, and there are as many different situations as there are individuals practically. So just to say, there's a lot there. But a few simple pointers. One that we touched on already is we can help people by holding them accountable, by caring when we see someone who shouldn't be eating so much, and we kind of say, "My gosh, I thought were you on a diet? I thought I remembered you saying that." I mean, being gentle about it. We don't need to condemn people or drive people, because shame causes us to do all kinds of weird things. So shaming people is generally not a good strategy for uh, helping people to grow. But just being supportive, being caring, and sometimes doing something with somebody. It's a little bit like physical muscles. If I help you, like a spotter when you're doing weightlifting, or if we're going to carry something, we carry it together. And that helps somebody to grow. When people do physical therapy, they often lean on another person so that they can take their first steps. And then after taking some steps and their legs get a little stronger, they don't need to lean quite as much. So we can apply those things to the realm of virtue also, that just being a helping hand to give somebody a little motivational pep talk, stir up some passion in them, and then they can, help them to shape that with virtue to in the right direction. Encourage someone, in some cases, to eat. Some people don't eat enough, and have that, are holding themselves back too much for different reasons. So sometimes we have to encourage them that way, or certainly not giving bad example. If somebody shouldn't be drinking, well, then maybe we shouldn't be drinking in their presence either, and be sensitive to what other people are going through. And we were talking about law a little earlier, having some rules, having some accountability, having some clear boundaries. By establishing boundaries, we can really help people to know that they've crossed them and that that's too much. And that reinforces prudence and temperance and in holding back. Giving good example is always a helpful motivator, and reinforcing the good is always a very helpful motivator. When someone does order a good amount of food, or someone does hold themselves back to one drink, or someone chooses not to go to that party that they might have gotten high with, or hang out with friends that are a bad example, reinforce that. We can tell people that we're proud of them and that they've done a good job, and that that's a hard decision, but they exercised temperance and made a good decision. So those are different ways that we can reinforce people's hearts, reinforce people's virtues and decision making, to help them get along a good path. And then, as we've talked about before, when we start making good decisions, it becomes easier to make good decisions. When we start moving forward in a good way and becoming stronger, it becomes easier to do good things. And so sometimes just helping people to get going, or picking them up when they're down, can really make a huge difference.
And I thank you for giving that practical answer there. And you can see how just starting that momentum can carry forward in the many other people around you. And you're doing the right thing, you're helping someone else doing the right thing, and it'll just continue to grow and expand. So with that being said, we hope that this has been a helpful cast for everyone out there. We hope that you guys enjoyed the Virtue series that we just completed, and we will be with you here again next week. Thank you very much for listening, and continue to spread the cast.